She was already crying when the wheels lifted. Not the kind that fits in a movie. No clean single tear, no elegant composure breaking. The real kind. The kind you manage in layers. First the breath, held at the sternum until the ribs ache. Then the face turned toward the oval window, forehead nearly against the glass. Then the hand, her right hand, pulling the sleeve of the gray hoodie past her knuckles, her index finger wrapped tight in the fabric like an anchor she could feel without thinking about. Flight 247, O'Hare to Hartsfield-Jackson, 10:47 p.m. departure. She had been at the gate since 8:15 with 2 checked bags that contained the deliberate evidence of a fresh start and a carry-on that held 3 folders from her last caseload, a water bottle she had not touched, and an audio message from her sister she had listened to 4 times. She pressed play one more time as the plane taxied. I don't want you to go thinking you failed. You didn't, okay? You didn't. 18 seconds. She let the phone go dark against her thigh. The man in 14B had settled in at 10:41. She registered him only as sound, the particular exhale of someone deeply tired, the crinkle of a jacket over what looked like scrubs, the soft click of headphones going on before the boarding door sealed shut. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. The engine's built to the pitch that always sounds irreversible, and she kept crying against the window, and he kept his eyes forward. 45 seconds after takeoff, she heard his headphones come off. She didn't turn. She could feel him recalibrate, not in a dramatic way, not in the way of someone preparing to intervene. It was quieter than that. The slight shift of weight, the pause. She had spent 6 years as a social worker, and she knew the difference between someone deciding whether to speak and someone deciding how. He leaned in slightly, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to pretend the distance was real, and said low and without any performance, "You don't have to pretend here." That was all. No diagnosis, no offer, no invitation to explain herself, just permission, the cleanest kind, the kind that costs nothing to give and everything to receive. And Naya, who spent her days giving that exact permission to other people, who knew precisely what those words did to a body held too long in containment, felt herself come undone the rest of the way. He called the flight attendant without drama, asked for water. When turbulence hit 20 minutes later, that sudden lurch that freezes people already at their edges, he raised one hand slowly, palm up, and said, "Breathe with me. Just follow along." He lifted his hand. Let it fall. Steady as a metronome. She followed. Because she didn't need a hero. She didn't need a solution or a speech. She needed someone who wouldn't panic with her. Someone whose stability wasn't a performance. And he was, in some way she had no framework for, exactly that. The question that would take months to answer: who is a person like that? And what does it cost him to exist? If this story is already doing something to you, you know exactly how she felt in that seat. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter. It takes 1 second, and it genuinely keeps us writing. The water arrived in a plastic cup. Small. Practical. She took it with both hands, because one wasn't steady enough on its own, and she drank half of it in one breath, and then held the cup in her lap like it was doing something important. He had put his headphones back around his neck, not on. She noticed. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was wrecked at the edges, the way voices get when they've been swallowing something for too many hours. He nodded. Didn't make it a moment. Didn't fill the space after it with anything. Just nodded and turned back to the small screen on the seat back in front of him, which he wasn't actually watching. She appreciated that more than she could explain. Nia Williams had a very finely tuned radar for people who were kind because they wanted something back. 6 years of shelter hallways and crisis calls and mandatory reporting paperwork, and 7 p.m. case meetings that ran until 9. She knew performance when she saw it. She knew the particular quality of attention that was really just waiting for a reward. This wasn't that. This man, 14B, scrubs under a jacket, the particular stillness of someone who had learned to be useful in rooms where being useful was the difference between someone living and not, wasn't performing anything. She pressed the side of the plastic cup against her cheek. Cool, grounding. "I'm not usually like this on flights," she said. She didn't know why she said it. She hadn't planned to say anything. "Okay," he said, still not looking at her, still not making it a thing. "I mean, I'm a nervous flyer, but not... This isn't that." "I know," he said. And then, after a pause that wasn't uncomfortable, "You were already crying on the ground." She looked at him. He was looking at the blank seatback screen now, genuinely this time, as if giving her the space of his profile instead of his face. "You noticed from the gate?" "I notice things. It's not personal." A beat. "That came out wrong. I meant, it's occupational. I work in the ER. I read rooms before I enter them." Something in her chest shifted, not dramatically, not in the way of recognition, just a small recalibration. An ER nurse. Which explained the quality of his stillness. Which explained the breathing thing. Which explained the particular way he had leaned in. Not to comfort, exactly, but to orient. To give her a fixed point. "Nia," she said. "Woo Jin." He turned his head slightly. Not quite a full look. Enough to acknowledge the exchange. Park. But mostly Woo Jin. She nodded. Turned back to the window. Chicago had dissolved into darkness and grid below. The orange glow of a city she had lived in for 28 years of her life. And she was leaving it at 10:47 on a Tuesday night, with 2 checked bags and a folder of unfinished cases, and her sister's voice still looping somewhere under her sternum. "I got a job," she said. "In Atlanta. I've been a social worker here for 6 years, and I got a job in Atlanta, and I told everyone it was a promotion, and it is a promotion, but that's not actually why I'm going." She stopped. "I don't know why I'm telling you this, because I'm not going to remember it the way people who know you will," he said. "The plane lands, we get off. We don't know each other. It's easier." She looked at him properly for the first time. He was looking at her now, too. Steady, dark eyes that had the particular quality of someone who had seen a great deal of bad news delivered and had learned to keep his face from making it worse. "That's either very wise," she said, "or very sad. Both, maybe." A ghost of something crossed her face. Not a smile exactly, too tired for that, but the first loosening. The plane hummed. She let her head rest against the seat. Somewhere in the overhead bin, her carry-on held her sister's voice on a phone screen, and 3 cases she would never finish, and the small digital evidence of a life she was leaving in layers, like shedding, like something that had been necessary and was now done. She didn't sleep, but she stopped crying. And Woo Jin, who had been awake since 6 a.m., and had worked 12 hours straight, and had a message from his mother on his phone that he had not opened since he boarded, kept his headphones around his neck for the rest of the flight. He would not be able to explain why, later, when Caleb asked. He would just say, it seemed like the right thing to do. Then he'd show fire. Hartsfield-Jackson at midnight had the specific quality of all airports at midnight. Half the lights too bright, the other half tired. People moved with the particular urgency of travelers who just wanted to be wherever they were going. And the baggage carousel for Flight 247 turned and turned with a patience that felt pointed. Her bags didn't come. She stood at the carousel for 40 minutes. She watched every other bag from her flight get claimed and carried away. She watched the carousel slow and stop, and a recorded announcement thank everyone for their patience, and she was left standing there with her carry-on at her feet and her hands at her sides, and the specific, bottomless feeling of someone who has spent their very last reserve of composure. She went to the counter. The woman behind it was professional and unhelpful in the precise way of someone following a script. Forms to fill. Reference numbers to note. Standard 48-hour window for recovery. She would receive an email. Was this her current address in Atlanta? She didn't have a current address in Atlanta yet. She was staying in an Airbnb for the first 2 weeks, and she heard herself explain this in a voice that was getting very thin around the edges. And the woman said she understood, and read off the form, and Naya's vision went blurry. She wasn't going to cry again. She had already used whatever grace period applied to breaking down in front of strangers. "Okay," she said, when her voice threatened to fail. "Okay, thank you." She turned from the counter and stood in the middle of the terminal with her carry-on and the 3 folders and the water bottle and her entire present life, and she pressed her lips together very firmly and her chin dropped. "Hey." She turned. Woojin was standing 10 feet away. He had his duffel over one shoulder and his jacket in his other hand, and the particular expression of someone who had been about to leave and had decided not to. "You were already through the exit," she said. "I was." He walked over, looked at the counter behind her. "Lost bags?" She pressed her lips together again, nodded. He asked her the name of the airline. She told him. He pulled his phone out, searched for 30 seconds, and said, "There's a direct claim number, not the counter, not the email system. You call this, they locate it in real time. Your bags are probably in a holding area here already. They redirect checked luggage when there's a late gate change, and sometimes it just doesn't make it to the right carousel." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I travel for work sometimes. Lost a bag on the way to a conference in Boston, spent 4 hours at the counter. A colleague told me about the number afterward." He held the phone out. "You want me to read it to you, or—" "I'll write it down." She wrote the number on the inside of one of her folders, called it right there in the terminal. The woman who answered was, remarkably, more competent than the counter. Located both bags in under 3 minutes, confirmed they were in the terminal, sent a retrieval slip to her phone. 15 minutes later, she had both bags. She stood beside them on the curb, the Atlanta night air against her face, and looked at the man who had gone back through an airport at midnight for a stranger. "You were on your way out," she said again. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine question. "Why?" "You were about to break down for the second time in 3 hours," he said, simply. "The first time I could sit with it. This one had a fix." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's a very particular way to be kind," she said. "I'm not particularly kind," he said. "I just noticed." An Uber pulled up. Hers, she checked. She loaded her bags. Before she got in, she hesitated with one hand on the door. "I don't know why you came back," she said. "But, thank you. Both times." He nodded. She got in. The Uber pulled away. She watched him through the rear window until the terminal curve took him from view. She did not know his last name was Park. She did not have his number. She had the memory of 2 sentences and a breathing exercise and a man who went back through an airport because the fix existed and he had noticed. She turned forward and watched Atlanta appear through the windshield, dark and new and too open. Taktaniyakor-gichin. She had been in Atlanta 45 minutes when Woojin found her again. The Uber back to the terminal. His phone left in the charging station at the gate. He realized 2 blocks out, meant walking past the same baggage area, at the same time she walked back in to use the restroom before the Airbnb. The probability of it was the kind of thing you don't examine if you're smart. "Coincidence," she said, when she spotted him. "Or a charging port," he said. They ended up in the only airport cafe still open, a place with overhead lighting 2 shades too yellow, and a menu that charged $9 for a drip coffee and had clearly not been updated since 2019. She got the drip coffee. He got tea. They sat at a high counter by the window, and the terminal was almost empty behind them, and everything felt very much like the gap between one life and another. She told him in pieces. Not the polished version she had given to her supervisor, not the strategic narrative she had given to her mother, and not the careful, emotional version she had given to her best friend Renee. The airport at midnight version, which is the one that comes out when you are too tired to perform. She told him about the client she had lost last year, not to death, but to a system that failed him incrementally, in documented stages, in ways she had flagged in writing, and nothing had changed. She told him about the caseload numbers. She told him about the 7 p.m. meeting that ended at 9:30 p.m., and the call at 11 from a number she recognized, and the way her body had stopped feeling like hers, somewhere around month 8 of the following year. She told him about Imani, carefully, the way you tell someone about a wound that is still healing. My sister needed me, she said. I was the only consistent thing in her life for about 3 years. Our parents weren't around in the way that counted. I was working at a shelter 2 blocks from where she went to school. It made sense for me to be her anchor. And I was. I genuinely was. And then I ran out. Of what? Of... She turned the cup in her hands. Of the version of myself that could be everything she needed. And I stayed for another year past that, running on what was left. And she could feel it. The audio she sent me tonight. She said she heard me telling my friend I needed to disappear for a while. And she was calling to say she didn't want me to go thinking I'd failed her. He was quiet for a moment. Did you? He asked. Fail her? No. The word was immediate. No, but I chose to go, and I know I needed to, and I still... She pressed her lips together. I still feel like I should have been able to stay longer. Guilt isn't proof of love, he said. Sometimes it's just a habit. She looked at him. Sometimes we carry guilt because it's the one feeling that makes us feel like we're still doing something, he said. Like the guilt is the last form of effort. But it isn't. It's just weight. The cafe hummed. Someone announced a boarding call 3 gates down. She looked at the ugly yellow light above the counter and felt something in her chest go very quiet, the way a room goes quiet after someone has said something true in it. You should work in the ER, she said. Wait, you do. He almost smiled. Not quite. The corners of his eyes. He wrote his number on a napkin. Set it on the counter between them. He said, if the new city gets too loud, which it will in the first week, you can send a message. No obligation. No... He searched for the word. No strings, she said. No expectation, he said, which was slightly different, and they both knew it. She looked at the napkin, looked at him. Put the napkin in the pocket of the gray hoodie. They finished their coffees. His flight back, he'd been returning from a training weekend in Chicago when the charging port crisis occurred, left at 1:30 a.m. She had a car waiting. They walked out of the cafe at 1:15 and parted ways at the terminal fork with a nod that was too brief for what the last 2 hours had been. She took a photo of the ugly coffee cup before she walked away. Half ironic, half something else. Proof that it happened. The Airbnb was fine. Clean, impersonal, smelling of someone else's dryer sheets. She put both checked bags against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed and didn't unpack. The napkin was in her hoodie pocket. She took it out and set it on the bedside table and looked at it like it was a question she hadn't decided to answer yet. The first week in Atlanta moved with the particular strangeness of places that have not yet become real. She went to the grocery store and did not see anyone she knew, which was the point and was also disorienting. She took a different route to the new office each day, learning the city the way you learn something with both intention and caution. She ate alone. She liked her supervisor's directness, and was not sure her supervisor liked her back, which was familiar and manageable. She found the cafe with good windows on day 4. The napkin sat on the bedside table for 3 days before she moved it to the carry-on's inner pocket. Not putting it away, just not keeping it where she could see it every morning while she was still too raw to make decisions. She called Renee at 2 a.m., which was 1 a.m. in Chicago, and Renee answered on the second ring because Renee always answered. Tell me you got there, okay? I got there. My bags got lost. Of course they did. And I met someone at the airport. A pause. Renee's particular pause. The one that contained about 9 different responses being sorted for the most effective one. Define met. He sat next to me on the flight. I was having a moment. He helped. What kind of helped? The kind that didn't ask for anything. Another pause. Longer. Nia, that's the kind you should be more scared of, not less. I know. She looked at the napkin. He gave me his number. I don't know if I'm going to use it. What does he do? ER nurse. Oh, that tracks completely. Renee sounded genuinely amused and genuinely concerned in the exact same tone, which was her particular talent. What's his name? Woo Jin. Korean American? Second generation, I think. Okay, so you have an ER nurse named Woo Jin who sat next to you while you had a breakdown, helped you find your luggage at midnight, and gave you his number with, what, no expectation? She paused. He either wants everything from you, or he genuinely just saw a person who needed something and did the thing. He said the second. They all say the second. He didn't say it like a line. Renee was quiet for a moment. Then, are you going to use the number? Nia looked at the napkin. I'm going to keep it first, she said. That feels like enough for tonight. Okay. A warmth in Renee's voice. The particular warmth of someone who knows you well enough to not push. Get some sleep. Your first day at the new job is Thursday. I know. And Nia. She paused. You didn't fail her. You know that, right? She didn't answer right away. I know, she said finally. I'm working on believing it. She hung up, looked at the ceiling. The new city breathed outside the window. Too open. Too quiet. Too new. She thought about the word Woo Jin had used. Expectation, not strings. The distinction mattered and she wasn't sure why yet. She put the napkin in the inner pocket of the carry-on, not thrown away, not saved on her phone, just kept. A strange object, a door she hadn't decided to open. She fell asleep at 3 a.m. with the gray hoodie still on, her index finger curled loose in the sleeve, no longer gripping, just resting. 11 days. She unpacked her bags, found the Airbnb's coffee maker, located a grocery store 3 blocks away, and bought the kind of things you buy when you're starting over. Coffee, bread, eggs, a plant she didn't need. Started the new job on Thursday. The team was competent and her supervisor was not warm but was respectful, and her caseload, by agreement, started at half capacity. Her office had a window that looked onto a parking structure, which was fine. Fine was something she could build from. She called her mother twice. Called Imani once, carefully, and the call was short, but not bad. Her sister's voice was more stable than the audio had been, and Nia said, I didn't leave because of you. And Imani said, I know. And neither of them said anything else because they were both still learning what to do with that. Renee texted daily, memes mostly, punctuated by check-ins that were disguised as memes. The napkin sat in the carry-on for 11 days. On the 12th day, she found it while looking for a folder. She stood in the middle of her new apartment. She had moved from the Airbnb on day 8, and she held it and she thought about it for about 4 minutes. Then she texted the number a single period. She put the phone down, picked it back up, put it face down on the kitchen counter and made coffee, and stood looking at the parking structure through the window and told herself she didn't know why she'd done it, which was not true. She had done it because she had been thinking about what he said at the airport. Not all of it. Not the whole conversation. Just that one sentence. Guilt isn't proof of love. Sometimes it's just a habit. She had been carrying that around like a small weight in her chest for 12 days, and she wanted someone to know she hadn't thrown the napkin away. The phone lit up. I'm here. Breathe. She read it 3 times. Felt something happen in her throat that was not crying. Was, in fact, the opposite of crying. The loosening that comes after. She typed, How do you still remember? He replied, You seemed like someone worth remembering. She put the phone down, picked it up again, typed, The new city is better than I thought it would be. And then, The coffee here is good, actually. Blasphemy, he wrote back. Nothing beats airport drip. She laughed. Out loud, in her new kitchen, in front of the parking structure. the first real laugh since Chicago. She looked at the coffee cup photo she had taken at the airport, still in her phone roll. Then she typed, "I still have the photo of the ugly cup. Archive it," he wrote. Historic artifact. She was smiling when she put the phone down this time. And the thing about the smile, the thing she noticed and then moved quickly past, was that it felt clean, not strategic, not performed for anyone, just present. She went back to her folder, finished the report. She did not check her phone for the next 2 hours, but when she did, there was one more message from him, sent 20 minutes after the last exchange. "Glad you kept the napkin." If you've ever sent a single punctuation mark to someone and held your breath, you know exactly what she felt when that reply came through. Subscribe so you're here for what happens next. Odd. The thing about Woo Jin, she came to understand over the following 3 weeks, was that he never sent more than 3 sentences at a time. At first she thought it was restraint. Then she thought it was disinterest. The polite kind, the kind that maintained the dynamic of the airport without actually investing in it. Then she paid closer attention. He texted in gaps. 12 minutes between her message and his reply, which meant he had read it and thought before answering. He never answered during shifts. She figured that out by the timestamps, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. going dark without exception, replies clustering at 6:15 and at 9 p.m., and occasionally at 11. He asked 1 question per conversation, never 2, and the question was always the one she hadn't expected. She had said, "The job is going well. My supervisor is difficult but fair." And he had replied, "Do you like the work, not the performance of it, the actual work?" She had thought about that for a while before answering. She had said, "I found a cafe near the office that I like." And he had replied, "Does it have good windows?" "Why windows?" she typed. "You turn toward the window on the plane," he wrote. "People who do that need good light." She didn't answer for 10 minutes. Then, "It has very good windows." It wasn't romantic exactly. It was something more precise than romantic. It was the feeling of being read accurately, of saying one thing and having the real thing underneath it acknowledged without being excavated. She hadn't known that was something she needed until it started happening. She told Renee about it on a Sunday call. Renee listened and then said, "Okay, so he's perceptive, careful, and not trying to fix you. That's either a healthy person or someone who has learned to be very good at not being present." "I've thought about that," Nia said, "and I think it's the first one. But I don't know enough yet. What would knowing enough look like?" Nia was quiet for a moment. "I asked him why he came back at the airport," she said. He took a really long time to answer, and then he said, "I don't actually know, and I've been sitting with that for days." "Because it's honest," Renee said. "That's scarier than if he had a clean reason. Much scarier. So what are you going to do?" "Keep talking to him," she said. Carefully. She had also, in those 3 weeks, begun to notice the things he didn't say. He mentioned the ER in passing. Shift hours, a difficult case framed so obliquely it was nearly invisible. A colleague named Caleb, who featured as comic relief. He mentioned his mother once, a single sentence. She called again. "I'll deal with it later." He hadn't elaborated. She hadn't pushed. But she remembered. On the plane, before he took his headphones off, she had seen him close his phone on a message he didn't open. She had registered it the way she registered everything in crisis rooms. Peripheral, filed, not used until it became relevant. She thought about it now. She thought, this man holds everything up and has no idea how to put any of it down. She knew exactly what that looked like, because she had lived it for 6 years. And the recognition was both comfort and warning, which was the most complicated thing she had felt since landing in Atlanta. "You're different," Caleb said at 6:18 a.m., between the end of their shift and the beginning of the next one. Woojin was at his locker. He did not turn around. Different how? Easier. Less. Caleb considered his vocabulary, which was extensive when he wanted it to be. less like someone holding a structural wall in place. I'm fine. I know you're fine. I've known you for 4 years, and fine is your baseline and also your default and also your avoidance response, so... Caleb leaned against the adjacent locker. Something good is happening. Woojin put his jacket on, closed the locker. I met someone on a flight back from Chicago. How someone? A woman who was having a hard night. She needed... He paused. She needed someone to not panic with her. That's all. And then? And then we ended up in the airport cafe until 1 a.m. and I gave her my number. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Did she use it? Yes. How? She texted a period. Caleb stared at him. Then he laughed. Genuinely, the kind that crinkles the whole face. A period. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or a typo. It wasn't a typo. No, I know. That's why it's romantic. He sobered slightly. What's she like? Woojin thought about this. He had learned, in the ER, not to answer questions before he knew the answer. It caused more problems than the pause did. He said, She takes care of everyone and doesn't know how to let anyone take care of her. She's a social worker. She left Chicago because she burned out, and she's too proud to say that's what happened, so she calls it a promotion. Caleb nodded. And she makes you feel what, exactly? Like I don't have to hold anything up. Caleb was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is not absence of thought. Careful, he said. And his voice had changed. Not unkind, not joking. That feeling of not having to hold anything. You've been a fixer for everyone in your life for a long time. Your mom, the extra shifts, the cases you take on because no one else will. When someone comes along and doesn't need you to fix anything, he paused. Make sure you're choosing her because of who she is. Not because she's the first person who gave you a break from yourself. Woojin stood still with his hand on the locker door. I'm not managing her, he said. I didn't say you were. I said, careful. Caleb straightened. There's a version of this where she's a person you genuinely want, and a version where she's a rest stop. Don't mistake one for the other. She deserves better than that, and so do you. He walked out. The locker room went quiet. Woojin stood there for longer than necessary. The sentence Caleb had said sat in his chest like a coin dropped in deep water. He could feel the weight of it sinking, but couldn't see where it landed yet. He opened his phone, looked at the conversation. Her last message. I made the plant I bought survive week 2. This might be the first thing I've grown that didn't die under pressure. He had replied, That's the same thing you're doing to yourself, you know. She had gone quiet for a while. Then, that was an accurate and annoying observation. Then, thank you. He looked at the screen and thought about Caleb's question. What she was like. What this was. He thought about the way she had said, I've always been good at making people feel safe. He thought about the way he had replied, I know. He thought about the fact that she had looked at him like that answer was the most disorienting thing he could have said. Because it was. Because in 6 words, he had told her, I see what you do, and she wasn't used to being seen. He put his phone in his pocket. He drove home in the early morning and did not take an extra shift when the coordinator called at 9 a.m. He said, I'm off today. He made breakfast. He sat at the table by the window and ate it slowly. He drove home in the early morning and did not take an extra shift when the coordinator called at 9 a.m. He said, I'm off today. He made breakfast. He sat at the table by the window and ate it slowly. He opened his mother's message at noon. Woojin, Chuseok is in 2 months. Are you coming alone again? I'm not asking to pressure. I'm asking because I want to plan the food correctly. A pause in the message's practical facade. You sound different when we talk lately. More rested. Your voice. I don't know what it is. He sat with the message for a long time. His mother had the particular talent of Korean mothers of her generation, to say nothing directly and communicate everything. More rested was not a comment on his sleep schedule. It was a question she didn't know how to ask. He typed, I'll be there for Chuseok. Planning. He did not answer the unasked question because he did not yet have an answer that would survive the weight of her attention. He was choosing. He just needed to be sure what. She noticed it the Tuesday after Renee's visit. Renee had come for a long weekend, slept on her new couch, brought wine and Chicago pizza, and the specific version of honesty that only old friends carry. And during that weekend, something had clarified. She had laughed more than she had in months. She had let Renee organize her kitchen, which was a form of care she usually deflected. She had slept 8 hours, and she had talked about Woojin. Renee had listened, had said very little, and then on Sunday morning over coffee had said, "You're relieved when he texts back." Yes. You're happy when he asks the right question. Yes. You keep his message on your phone, the first one. I'm here. Breathe. You've shown it to me twice this weekend. Nia had looked at her coffee. I know. So what's the problem? I came here to start over, she said. Alone. That was the plan. I came here to prove I could do it without needing anything from anyone. And now there is a person in Atlanta who I think about, and I check my phone for, and who makes me feel... She stopped. Feel what? Less alone, she said. And that terrifies me. Renee had looked at her with a directness that was not unkind. Nia, less alone is the whole point. That's not a failure of the plan. That's the plan working. But after Renee left, the fear consolidated. She could name it now, precisely. She was becoming dependent. Not in the way of need, but in the way of warmth. She was warming toward him, and that warmth was making her vulnerable in a way she had not authorized and could not control. She went cold, not dramatically, politely. She answered his texts in 2 words or fewer. When he asked a question, she answered it without anything extra. No reciprocal curiosity, no small revelations, no photos of her office window or the plant. She was there, and she was not there, and she was good at it. She had spent years being functionally present while personally absent. It was her most practiced skill. The logic, in her own chest, was this. She had arrived in Atlanta with a plan that was essentially about building something small and hers. Not grandiose. Just a job that suited her better. A city she could be anonymous in. A version of herself that did not require constant output. The plan did not include a person who could read her in 45 seconds and choose to stay. The plan did not include warmth she had not budgeted for. And the warmth was the problem. Not the risk of it failing. She knew how to survive things failing. The risk of it not failing. The risk of becoming the person who had finally received care, and then could not imagine its absence. That was the version of herself she was most afraid of. The one who needed it. 3 days passed. On the 4th day he sent, "You don't have to explain, but I want you to know I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give." She read it, did not reply. On the 5th day, "You're not protecting me. You're hiding." She put the phone face down on the table. She went to work. She took a client's call that ran 45 minutes over. She made dinner. She came back to the phone. The message was still there. 5 words that were the most accurate thing anyone had said to her in months, and she hated them with the specific hatred of someone who has been understood at the wrong moment. She saved the message. Did not reply. Stared at the ceiling of her new apartment in the new city she was supposed to be building into something solid, and thought, he is the first person who has said, "You're hiding," and meant specifically her, not her circumstances, not her past, just her, the exact her. The one she had been successfully concealing since she was old enough to understand that making others feel safe was easier than letting them see you. She picked up the phone. Did not type anything. Put it down. Fell asleep with the gray hoodie on. Her hand was loose in the sleeve, not gripping, not anchoring, just resting, but uncertainly. She called him on day 7. Not texted, called. at 8:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, which she knew was his window between shift end and sleep. She had learned his schedule without meaning to, the way you learn the rhythms of people you are paying attention to. He answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said. His voice was different on the phone, lower, less precise, the particular quality of someone who has come down from 12 hours of functional alertness. "I'm not hiding," she said. A pause. Then, "Okay. I was, for a week. But I'm calling because I'm not doing that anymore." She was standing at the kitchen window. The parking structure was dark. "I got scared. I know. I came here to not need anyone," she said. "And then you happened, which was not part of the plan." "What part of me?" She thought about it. "The part where you don't ask for anything. It makes me trust you in a way I haven't earned yet, and that scares me more than if you had an obvious agenda." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's one of the most honest things anyone has said to me." "I'm practicing," she said. "Honesty. As a concept I apply to myself rather than other people." She heard something shift, not quite a laugh, but the quality of one. "Can I say something?" "Yes. I talked to my colleague, after I sent the message. He said," he paused. "He said make sure you're choosing her for who she is, not because she's a rest stop." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that for a week. And I know the answer," he said. "But I wanted to make sure I knew it cleanly. Not just because the feeling of being with you is easy, because it is. Being with you is the first easy thing in a long time. But easy isn't. That's not the reason." "What's the reason?" "You're honest when it costs you," he said. "You carry the weight of people you don't owe. You cry without permission on planes, and you keep the napkins, and you send a period at midnight 12 days later, and that tells me more about who you are than any conversation could." He paused. "That's who I'm choosing, not the relief of it. You." She pressed her forehead against the cool kitchen window, felt something unlock behind her sternum that she had been keeping very carefully sealed. "I don't know what to do with that," she said honestly. "You don't have to do anything with it right now," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." They talked for 6 more minutes. Nothing important. She told him about the client call that ran over. He told her about a vending machine on the 3rd floor that dispensed the wrong item every 3rd selection, and had become a kind of mascot. She laughed. He laughed, low and genuine. When she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She thought, this is the first time in 6 years someone has told her they are choosing her, specifically her, and she has not immediately looked for the cost. She thought about what it meant that this felt fragile rather than solid, not because she didn't believe him, but because she had not yet rebuilt the muscle that knew how to receive that. She was going to. She could feel it, the way you feel the beginning of repair. She picked up the gray hoodie and put it on. Her finger settled in the sleeve, not gripping, just resting. She thought briefly about his mother, about Chuseok, about what it meant that he had carried a weight his whole life that sounded so much like the weight she had carried, just shaped differently. His was inherited obligation, the second-generation silence, the untranslated burden of parents who had given everything and therefore couldn't be disappointed. Hers was chosen obligation, compounded over years, made structural by a profession that called it duty. They were both people who had become very good at the thing asked of them, and had never once asked, "What do I want?" She thought about that for a long time. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she had the question. Clearly, finally, hers. The call came on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the 6-minute window. Imani's voice had a particular quality when something was wrong. It went very even. Not elevated, not thin. Flat and careful, the way someone talks when they're trying to sound fine and don't have enough energy to pull it off. "I'm okay," her sister said immediately. I'm having a hard week." My roommate situation fell through, and I'm trying to figure out the housing thing, and the financial aid appeal got denied. And I know you're building something in Atlanta, and I didn't want to call. But Renee said, "Hey," Nia said. "Stop. Tell me what's happening." She listened. It was a genuine crisis, not the kind that required emergency action, but the kind that requires someone to stay on the phone and take it seriously. The denied financial aid. The housing gap. The feeling that every system she had tried to navigate had a trapdoor she kept falling through. When Imani finished, Nia's first impulse arrived exactly as expected. Book a flight. Go back. Take the folders out of the carry-on and replace them with clean ones, and go be the harbor again. She knew exactly where to get the ticket. She already had her credit card out. Woo Jin had dropped off food outside her door that afternoon. A quiet knock, no entrance expected, a bag from the Korean restaurant 3 blocks from his hospital. He'd been in Atlanta for a conference that week, and he'd texted, "I'll be nearby. You need anything?" She had said, "No." He had appeared anyway, bag outside the door, no comment. He was still there, in the kitchen, making tea while she was on the phone. He had not tried to listen. He was just there. When she hung up, she sat at the table and didn't move. The credit card was in her hand. Woo Jin set a cup of tea in front of her, sat down across from her, did not say anything. She looked at the credit card. She thought about Chicago, the weight of it, the way her body had stopped feeling like hers somewhere around month 8. She thought about the letter she had written to herself when she applied to the Atlanta position, which was folded in the same carry-on that had held the napkin. You are allowed to build something for yourself. Staying would not make you loyal. It would make you gone in a different way. She put the credit card down. "I want to go back," she said. "Every part of me that has been doing this job for 6 years wants to go back and fix it." "I know," he said. "She's my sister." "I know." She looked at him. "Say the thing." He waited a moment. Then, "Are you going out of love? Or out of fear of being seen as someone who didn't go?" She felt the question land exactly where he had aimed it, felt her breath stop. "That's different from abandoning her," he said quietly. "That's making sure the reason is yours." She was quiet for a very long time. Then she cried. Not the flight kind, not the broken kind. The kind that comes when something inside finally puts down something heavy. She pressed her hands over her face and she cried. And he moved his chair next to hers and didn't say anything at all, just stayed, present, solid, not panicking. When it passed, she wiped her face and looked at him. "I'm going to call her back," she said. "I'm going to help her navigate the appeal. I know the right contacts at the financial aid office. I know the language that works. I can do this from Atlanta." She paused. "I'm not going back." He nodded. "Not because I'm choosing myself over her," she said. "Because I can help her better from here. As someone who has her head on." "I know," he said. "Stop saying that like you knew before I did." "I did know before you did." He said it plainly, without pride. "I've been watching you figure it out for weeks." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she called Imani back. She worked the problem for an hour and a half. Appeals process, emergency housing contacts, a backup financial resource she had used twice in Chicago for clients in identical situations. When she hung up, Imani had a plan. Not a perfect one, a real one. She set the phone down. Woo Jin was washing the teacups. "Thank you," she said. He turned off the tap. "You did that. You asked the right question." "That's different," he said. "You did the work." It happened 6 weeks later, in an ordinary way, which was the only way it was ever going to happen with them. She had woken up at 8 on a Sunday, her day off, his day off, which had begun occurring with a regularity that neither of them had formally proposed. He was already up, which she had expected, making coffee in her kitchen in the loose gray shirt he had left folded on her chair Friday night because she had said it was cold, and he was warm, and neither of them had made a thing of it. The plant was still alive on the windowsill. Week 9. She came in and sat at the table, and he put a cup in front of her and sat across from her. And they read things on their phones and didn't speak for 22 minutes. She was aware, distantly, that this was the first morning in 6 years where she had woken up and not immediately reached for the crisis folder. No one was in emergency. Her caseload existed in its proper proportion. Imani had sent her a voice message at midnight that was just, "The appeal got approved. I got the room. I can't believe it worked." She had listened to it 3 times. She looked at Woo Jin. He was reading something, not texting, actually reading, the slight focus of someone genuinely absorbed. And she thought about Caleb's question that he had relayed on the phone, what she was like. She thought about the answer he had given. Honest when it costs her. She had been trying to live up to that since. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked up. "Your mother's message. The one on the plane that you didn't open." He was still for a moment. "You don't have to answer," she said. "No, He set his phone down. "She wanted to know if I was bringing anyone home for Chuseok. It's a recurring question. For the past 3 years I've said no. I'm busy. Because I was always busy. And I hadn't opened it because I already knew the answer was going to be no, and I didn't want to deal with the feeling of it. And now?" He looked at her. "I don't know yet," she said, before he could speak. "I'm not ready for that. I just wanted you to know I noticed the message. On the plane. You noticed that. I notice things," she said. "It's occupational." He smiled. Fully this time. Not the corner of the eye version. It changed his whole face. She had been waiting, she realized, for that smile. "I know I'm not fixed," she said. "I'm still someone who defaults to being the harbor. I'm still someone who goes cold when I'm scared. I'm still going to need to practice. At this. At receiving things. At not managing everything from a distance." "I know," he said. "And you. You volunteer for exhaustion. You don't open messages that cost you. You solve problems for people, and you don't know how to ask for anything." "I know," he said again. Softer. "So this isn't simple," she said. "No. But I want it anyway." She looked at her coffee. "I'm saying that out loud before I lose my nerve." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Not dramatically, not urgently. The way a person sets something down carefully, with full attention. "Me too," he said. The morning continued. She made the second round of coffee. He looked at his phone, and then put it face down. The message from his mother had been sitting there since Thursday, and this time he opened it. She watched him read it. Watched him type a reply she couldn't see. Watched him set the phone down. "She wants to know if I'm bringing anyone," he said. "You said you didn't know yet." "I said you weren't ready yet," he said. "I know." She looked at him for a long moment. And the feeling that moved through her was not the desperate, hollow need of 6 years of giving everything. It was not shame, and it was not debt, and it was not the exhaustion of someone performing love for so long they forgot what it felt like to receive it. It was just warmth, clean and stable and hers. "Ask me again in a month," she said. He nodded. She finished her coffee. The plant was alive. The apartment smelled like his coffee and her hoodie, and the particular quality of a Sunday that has no emergency in it. She was not crying, but her eyes were warm, and if she had been crying it would have been the relief kind, the kind you don't have to hide, the kind you let run, the kind that means something is finally, quietly, over. There was a knock at the door at 11. A delivery. She opened it and found a paper bag from a coffee shop she didn't recognize, and inside it was an ugly airport-style paper cup. The exact same style as the cafe where they had sat at midnight, with the 2 yellow light and the $9 drip. Woo Jin was still at the table. He had not moved. "When?" she said. "Ordered it before I came over," he said. "There's a place near the hospital that uses those cups. I've been waiting for the right Sunday." She set the cup on the table next to hers, took a photo of them side by side, 2 ugly airport cups on a Sunday morning in Atlanta. Proof that it had kept happening. She looked at him across the table. He was looking at her in the way she had come to recognize, not waiting for anything, not wanting anything that required her to be different than she was. Just looking. "You're going to be terrible at letting me take care of you," she said. "Probably," he agreed. "I'm going to be terrible at being taken care of." "I know. We're going to have to work at this." "Yes," he said. "I know that too." She sat back down. He reached over and moved the 2 cups so they were side by side at the center of the table, equidistant. She watched his hands, the hands that had guided her breathing at 35,000 feet, the hands that had been open on his knee in a way that said ready but not rushing. And she thought, some people teach you what it looks like to be present. He had taught her, without trying. She intended to teach him the same thing back. Later, she would send Imani a message. It would say, "If the world ever gets too big, and I mean really too big, not manageable big, text this number a period. Just that," he'll reply, "I promise." She would include Woo Jin's contact. The gesture would close something between them that a phone call and an appeal and 1,000 previous conversations had not been able to close. Not because it was grand, but because it was small. It was her trusting her sister with something that mattered to her. It was her admitting the mattering. Imani would reply, "Who is this?" And Nia would reply, "The reason the napkin was worth keeping." The story started with her crying at 10:47 p.m. on a flight she had been trying not to take for 8 months. Not because she didn't want to go. She had wanted Atlanta with a desperation she hadn't allowed herself to name, had wanted the permission of a new city and a new caseload and the particular anonymity of starting over. She had not taken the flight because leaving felt like proof of the thing she feared most, that she was finite, that she could run out, that all the years of being the harbor had not been sustainable after all, which meant she had been wrong to believe they were, which meant she had failed the people who had depended on the belief. She had been crying before the wheels left the ground because she had chosen herself. For the first time, without qualification, without a plan that was really just a different way of serving, she had chosen herself. And she was not proud of it yet, and she did not know how to hold the choice without guilt. And she cried about it for 2 hours at 35,000 feet, with her forehead against the window and her finger wrapped in the sleeve of her gray hoodie. She did not know, at 10:47 p.m. on Flight 247, that the man in 14B had a message from his mother on his phone that he couldn't open. She did not know that he had been the son who solves everything for 32 years and had somewhere along the way stopped knowing what he wanted. She did not know that the word he would use, expectation, was the most honest thing anyone had given her in years, and that she would carry it around for 12 days before she knew what to do with it. She did not know any of that. She just knew. He didn't panic with her. He breathed steadily, and he stayed, and he did not make it mean something that it wasn't. The months after the flight were not a clean arc. She went cold when she was scared. She hid for a week. She almost bought a ticket back to Chicago from a place of fear disguised as love. She cried in her new kitchen while he sat next to her, and she rebuilt the same courage she'd been building her whole life. But differently this time, inward instead of outward. She was still the person who took the extra call, still the one who called Imani back with the contacts and the appeal language and the plan. She was still the harbor, but she was learning to be the harbor and also be inside it, not performing stability from the shore while drowning behind it. The gray hoodie was on the couch. It was Sunday, and she had worn it all morning, and she was not wearing it as armor. She was wearing it because it was comfortable, and because Woo Jin had borrowed it once without asking, and she had liked seeing it on him, and because it was warm. Her finger was loose in the sleeve, not wrapped, not holding, just there. She had kept the napkin. She had sent the period. She had called back, after 7 days, because she was not hiding anymore. And she had learned, slowly, with effort, without ceremony. that receiving care was not the same as owing it. That love, built on consistency, was quieter than she had been raised to recognize. That "I'm not going anywhere" meant nothing unless the person saying it had the actual steadiness to back it up. And he did, and she was learning to trust that it was real. The biggest risk had never been loving him. The biggest risk had been letting him see her. All of her. Not the polished harbor version. Not the functional professional. Not the woman who had everything under control. And staying in the room after. She had stayed. He had stayed. And the choice to stay was made fresh every day. Not in grand declarations, but in the small, consistent acts. The message answered honestly. The shift not volunteered for. The difficult thing said out loud instead of managed quietly. Both of them learning, in their own way, how to exist in a relationship that didn't require them to disappear. That, more than anything, was what she had chosen for the first time. Not the city, not the job, not the man. The choice to be visible, without a plan for what happened if the visibility was met with less than she deserved. It was met with more. She picked up her phone, opened the first message he had ever sent her. "I'm here. Breathe." She put the phone down, took a breath. Let it out. Tell us in the comments. Do you believe this kind of love still exists? Or is it too rare to be real?